The Kavanaugh nomination also sparked protests nationwide in a basically nationwide show of outrage. Many of these were completely or partially spontaneous. In Austin, even a group of protesters shut down a major bridge for 3 hours during the ACL festival, which is going on downtown. What were the demands, and where does the protest movement go from here? How did this all unfold? Joining us to talk about this were two of the protesters who were involved. We have Maddie Detelich. Thank you, Maddie, for coming on.
Thanks for having us, Brian.
And we also have Marina Roberts.
Hey, thanks for having us.
They are both, Maddie and Marina are the co-chairs of the DSA Housing Committee here in Austin, the Austin DSA Housing Committee. And also were present at the protest that shut down the Lamar Street Bridge. So maybe you can, share a little bit of what that experience was like for you when you first heard about it, and how the events kind of unfolded kind of that week and that day.
Yeah, so I guess I will jump in. I know we both have a lot to say, but as we were discussing before the show, or before we started recording, it's for many, it was just this whole process has just been so incredible, and and it's just so interesting to witness this kind of like mass reliving of trauma that's going on basically in every woman's life I know, and many men's lives as well. But just overwhelmingly, the female experience is one of trauma, and it's just so incredible what this process is done for that. Like if you spend any time online, or if you have a rich or if you have a social network that shares that sort of things, like for me, I can say that I even going back to the Kennedy resignation, right? Yeah, Kennedy resignation. I've just gotten so many messages from friends who aren't very politically involved saying, I just feel like giving up. Like, I didn't know it could be this bad. What do I do? Like, especially since getting involved in the Austin DSA Housing Committee, a lot of my friends from my pre-political or outside of politics know that is consumed my life now. So they come to me and they're like, how are you taking this news? And so, yeah, I was already kind of just in talks with a lot of my friends, really consumed by the news, having conversations with my male friends, being like, isn't it just, what do you make of that? Like, that this is like a turning over a rock. Like, when trauma gets brought up, as has been happening at punctuated moments since the kickoff of, I guess, the Me Too movement, you pick up this rock and just there's just so much going on underneath there. Like, every single woman has these stories, and it's like they just like keep coming. Like, and I know that I've found myself being like, oh, I hadn't really thought of this in a long time, but this happened to me, and like I'm not afraid to say that anymore. And like the impulse would have normally been like, oh God, I'm sorry I shared that disturbing thing. That's not polite, or that's uncomfortable. And now it's like, no, I'm glad I shared that disturbing thing. It's like I want men to know the trauma, the terror that women basically, like, if you know a woman, you know somebody that has to put on a happy face every day and like ignore like true horror that has happened like since the time they were born, for many women, unfortunately. And sorry, I think I've gone far enough down that rabbit hole, but so just so many conversations surrounding this. And then so when I got a message from one of my fellow female DSA organizers saying, hey, want to come go out and protest this nomination because it's looking like it's going to happen. We should get out there. It was a resounding hell yeah. 'Cause it was it was much needed. Marina, I've talked for a little bit.
Well, I guess the first thing that I would want to clarify also is just that neither Maddie nor I participated in this protest in our capacity as the DSA Housing Committee co-chairs. This wasn't something that the organization had the opportunity to really endorse democratically. And since we do everything democratically, it's not something that the DSA name or organization is officially attached to, despite the fact that I want to say a majority of the folks who were arrested were DSA members.
Right. And thanks for that important distinction.
Sure. Yeah. It's just, there was a lot of overlap there, but just because of the democratic nature of the organization, we weren't able to, make it a DSA event. But, I've basically done nothing but kind of reflect on the action since it happened, and for me, a lot of this goes back, to very personal lived experiences, like Maddie's alluding to, like in my own life pertaining to trauma that I've watched other women experience, and ways that I have been hurt myself. And I think that a lot of it just kind of has coalesced, right, in the Me Too movement. And that's something that happened in such a way that I cannot read the Kavanaugh nomination and confirmation, that whole process, as anything but a reaction to the Me Too movement. The cruelty, honestly, just the abject cruelty of the manner in which this process was undergone, to me, I think that it just sort of seems and it feels like something that happened in order to sort of set something straight for everybody. And what this confirmation is setting straight is that it's something that I've known and internalized, pretty well in my life. Just the knowledge that it is easier for regular people in America to believe that a woman with no history of fabricating lies to the police or to the government or to the public would come forward in conspiracy with other women to malign the name of a good man. And somehow all of those increasingly implausible facts are more believable than one man who, has a publicly facing persona that seems, good, is actually a rapist. And so for me, it was just kind of a turning point. I had never been arrested in my life before this protest. But for me, this was a very radicalizing moment. And it was radicalizing because I just recognized that this is only going to get worse for us. It was a slap in the face, but to even say that is just so putting it so lightly in terms of how it felt, in terms of how heavy it hit me and the women that I know, the women that I love, the women who have been victimized by this kind of trauma. Right,
because it's like they had to, because as soon as Kennedy resigned, everyone went to the conversation of Roe v. Wade, and then you take the most anti-feminist, anti-woman process to get this rapist candidate through to then overturn Roe v. Wade. It's just horrific. Like if you're not angry at that, then you're rich, probably. But
it takes an absolute level of privilege to not be just kind of furious at this the whole process, the way this thing went through. And I think it was certainly a learning experience for a lot of people who participated in this. I feel that in so many ways we can, I get into theory a lot on my show. I get into sort of like, let's really talk about what the state is. Let's really talk about what this and that is. But in so many ways, what people, the way people actually learn, the way people actually internalize what something like the state is, where, say, the police or the courts land on certain issues, what loyalties the police and the courts and these systems have, that comes from the experience, and that experience of sitting in front of those police, because we're talking about the the protest that happened in Austin here, it was last week, right? You know, as of today, it was, as of the recording of this, it was last week. So when you know, this happened, so many people were seeing, many for the first time, how antagonistic the police really are. They showed up in kind of this vulgar display of force. There were all of about 14 protesters sitting peacefully on the bridge, preventing traffic, but also allowing for emergency vehicles. That's one of the kind of straw men that people always like to use is, oh, well, what if an emergency vehicle, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, I was there. I witnessed the protest. I watched the emergency vehicles go past when they needed to go past. Nobody blocked emergency vehicles. Nobody blocked that part of it. But yet, even though this was a peaceful protest, even though this was, you know, absolutely, like, there was no attempt at violence at any point, I think what was getting hit on here was, you know, what really struck a nerve with the powers that be in this scenario was the fact that, you know, it was disrupting commerce. Ultimately, like, the police exist to protect private property, to protect the flow of commercial exchanges, et cetera, et cetera. So when you disrupt that economic stability in any way whatsoever, when you have the audacity to keep someone from getting to the ACL festival, that's the point at which people see that side of the police, and it was absolutely a fascistic display, vulgar display of force. I'd like to also go back a little bit to, you know, sort of the moment we're in right now, talking about what is Kavanaugh, what's the relation to the Me Too movement. And as I was thinking sort of about it, in many ways, the Me Too movement, its early success in many ways in holding powerful men accountable was based on this sort of, you know, these understood rules of how society operates, to the point where in the past, obviously, when you had someone who was being accused of being a rapist or whatnot, it was the way they would get out of it was by blaming the victim, et cetera, et cetera. So there was still this sense, there was still this facade of the you know, alleged predators having done no wrong. With Me Too, it relied on the fact that these people can be shamed out of this or that position. And what we saw with the Kavanaugh was sort of this blatant, this same sort of blatant display of force, where it was like that social norm, that sort of unwritten social norm that somebody can be shamed through public pressure out of a position of power, broke down in a way that was very public. And we saw just how insular this system was. We saw that there was no accountability, you know, essentially in any of the three major governments of in any of the three major branches of federal government. There's no way to hold the president accountable. There's no way to hold the Supreme Court accountable. There's no way to hold Congress accountable. And essentially they were all acting to insulate each other, to push this guy through at any cost. And it was just a giant middle finger to everybody. So I think that inspired such a real rage out of people, and that inspired a level of spontaneity I don't think I've seen in Austin in the time I've been here, almost ever. That level of really spontaneity, to the point where, like, it wasn't just the organizations. Like, the organizations obviously responded to it, you know, the various kind of groups that were able to, you know, help out with this. There was a National Lawyers Guild, of course there was a DSA, you know, these groups were able to be present and to help out as legal observers and as you know, make sure that people got out of jail okay. But by and large, this was a spontaneous movement coming out of just sort of sheer outrage, and the fact that you know, there was nothing really. You know, it was outrage because there was no sort of process through which this you know, through which some sort of change could be channeled. And I think, to me, it seemed like a very important learning opportunity for a lot of people. I know there are a lot of kind of thoughts there to riff off of, but that was kind of my take.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I appreciate you going to the disrupting the commerce part of it. Yeah, I actually just started a master's program in civil engineering, and I'm in a transportation course, and it is I had been exposed a little bit to the kind of like leftist theory of transportation and stuff, and how it is like it's a system of getting workers to their jobs and getting people to the goods that they're consuming. But it is kind of funny to be sorry, that I don't want to harp too much on that. But yeah, so when I was sitting on the bridge, I did happen to think about that. Like, oh wow, we're disrupting the flow of the goods and the workers. And yeah, that was actually the only people that I felt bad for on that bridge were like the workers, like in the buses. I was like, I hope they don't suffer any consequences. But so yeah, lots to riff on that. So I appreciate that. Or it's incredible. I think, yeah, something you said towards the end, I want to tie it back to that commerce thing. Yeah, we're at this point where we are like, we don't have a lot of electoral power, and even if we did, I mean, we've all a lot of people that are my age and older, we've now lived through the Obama presidency, and the first 2 years of that presidency when he had control of the House and Senate, and we witnessed that, and now we're here, and very little to show for it other than like accidentally making Medicare for all popular by giving us like but
yeah, the great accomplishment of the Obama presidency, the great shining accomplishment, was a Republican healthcare bill modeled after Mitt Romney's healthcare bill.
Right, and the Republicans didn't even like it. Like, I don't know, that was such a half measure.
Yeah,
it was disappointing.
So it's like we've all lived through that, and then now we saw the Trump election, and a lot of us are now, I mean, voting is such a big topic right now. There's so many organizations that are just dedicated now to registering and getting out the vote and running female candidates, and all of this like kind of like grassroots efforts focused on electoral stuff. But especially for those of us on the left, we're all like, yeah, but even if more of us did vote, I mean, we still are like experiencing this system of government that is like, I mean, the Republicans have been on this like plot to take over power now for decades, where they've been writing us out of the rules. And so yeah, even if we did show up in mass to the polls, and then even if we do get some seats, like, we saw the Obama presidency, so we can't even depend on if we do get elected officials. So there's so many layers, so many ifs. And yeah, it just doesn't feel like, I think for a lot of people, for me, definitely, I don't want to wait on those ifs. Like, and it doesn't feel like there's many ways to do it other than by starting to think of, well, how can we disrupt commerce? How can we do something that fundamentally challenges the structure of society? And when I was sitting on that bridge thinking about people's days being interrupted randomly, people that were quote unquote innocent, as some criticizers or critics online put it. An aside, I saw we were compared to terrorists because terrorists target innocent people.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, thinking about those people and their days being disrupted, it's just like capitalism relies on like everyone living their lives as if like there can never be a break. You know, so many people don't even have paid sick time or vacation time or time to take care of a sick relative or like a friend with a mental health crisis. Like, so much of our day-to-day lives relies on this like assumption that we can't stop, that we can't take a moment to breathe, that the gears of capitalism are just this like power plant almost, where it would take like, it would be massive, like it would take massive disruption to actually like take a break or take anything offline. And so I strongly believe in the need to show people that the world is not going to end if you lose a few hours of your day to think about an important issue. And it's just this multi-dimensional thing that like we have to think about how we can build a world where it's not going at the detriment of the people that are not machines. We are people. And but then also, yeah, so sorry, I think I might have gotten a little too wrapped up in the dimensionality of that.
Yeah, no, I definitely think there's a lot there. Really, you know, the disruption clearly hit on something, and I think, you know, broadly speaking, it was a very popular. It was a very popular movie. You know, having been there, having witnessed it, there was definitely a very, very strong support base for that, even among the people who did not necessarily join the protest. There were far more kind of honks of support and you know, shouts of support than there were you know, genuinely angry people. And you really got to see that level of divide, that I think people were looking for something to do, that people were looking for kind of ways to engage with this moment, and that was many people's ways of engaging, was simply, you know, honking. Hopefully the next time something like this happens, they can find sort of a more active way to be involved. And I think we've seen kind of a shift in people's understanding of how protest works, because for so long there was not a protest culture. There was not really an understanding of anything working outside of the electoral system, starting in many ways kind of with the defeat. You know, I know this is going really historical for you know, a discussion on you know, a recent disruption, but I mean, we can look at sort of the decline of the protest movement after kind of the 60s, you know, when COINTELPRO essentially smashed so many really strong workers' movements, socialist and communist movements. And that was the point at which, go figure, that was the point at which wages started remaining stagnant. That was the point at which essentially we started seeing this long, slow economic decline, which really culminated in sort of the overthrow of the Soviet Union. And then we had this like end of history moment. Well, that end of history moment ended. It became very apparent, like after this many decades of neoliberalism, so many of these power systems are now bare for all to see, where we saw a quote unquote, you know, progressive democratic policy or a democratic leadership after Bush that did nothing, again, passed the Republican healthcare bill. And now people, I think, are seeing that the only way to really stay engaged is to have an independent kind of structured movement outside of either the Democratic Party, mostly kind of outside the Democratic Party, obviously outside the Republican Party, because I lost my train of thought, but I'll get back on it in a second.
You're good.
So what the first, I think, iterations of that were the Occupy Wall Street movement, the first kind of reemergence of a protest movement in many ways. Occupy Wall Street, which was, again, largely kind of spontaneous. And in that there was no sort of command structure whatsoever, because, you know, it was largely kind of like the idea was that it was a total people's movement, but that sort of anarchy allowed for, you know, a certain level of you know, kind of disarray. We saw what would become the Black Lives Matter movement, these sort of spontaneous eruptions that were happening throughout the late 2000s, early 2010s, and, you know, into like Black Lives Matter, I think, was like 2015 or so. And now I think we're entering sort of a different stage as these movements continue to actually get stronger, to the point where people are seeing like other people are seeing what is actually necessary, that it requires some level of discipline and some level of really understanding what what the next step is beyond just the being at the protest. What is the next step toward keeping this thing going? And so for those of you who may be listening and may have been on the fence about this or that protest, one of the things I want to emphasize is that even though these are often like spontaneous, events, there was no sort of institutional backing to blocking off the bridge. That was a choice of the individual people who decide we want to block the bridge. We want we want there to be this disruption, so people are forced to pay attention. But it wasn't just like you weren't just on your own with that. There was a National Lawyers Guild there, a couple legal observers from the National Lawyers Guild who were marked and who were making sure essentially that the police did not brutalize the protesters. There was that system in place to make sure everyone got out of jail all right, because you were arrested and then sort of brought to jail essentially as simply so the police could keep business as usual going. Because again, God forbid you interrupt the economic system. God forbid you interrupt ACL, keep somebody from getting to Metallica. So there was that system in place, though, to make sure that people got out of jail okay. And I think that's important to understand that it's not just completely spontaneous, but in fact that it's like we have to have each other's back for all this. How supported did you feel during that whole, during the whole thing? How much did you really feel like you were comfortable being there and comfortable participating in this action?
Yeah, I was shocked with myself, to be honest, given that I had never been arrested prior to that action. I was just really surprised at how calm and collected I was throughout the entire endeavor. Because it was a 3-hour kind of duration that we had the bridge shut down, and I don't know. I felt like we just knew what we were doing, essentially. Two of the protesters who were kind of the key organizers who kind of mobilized both Maddie and I to be a part of it. They just kind of had some experience with nonviolent civil disobedience before. I think at least one of them had been arrested before.
In the Iraq War protests?
Yeah, I know one of them, but I don't know if it was both. But
right.
At any rate, it was definitely something that was planned to the extent that in order to engage in nonviolent civil disobedience and in order to minimize the harm to the individuals participating in that, minimizing the harm to the individuals getting arrested, I think that was planned extremely well. But yeah, I mean, I think that just my kind of observation to individuals who maybe have not ever participated in nonviolent civil disobedience, who have not been arrested before, I would definitely encourage you to do a certain baseline amount of planning prior to doing, this kind of action, prior to using this kind of tactic, because I just think that it goes much smoother. It's just much, you're kind of facilitating an action taking place and doing what the protest is meant to do, right? Because I think part of what you're trying to accomplish, right, is like, we've made commentary on, you're disrupting commerce. But I think part of the visceral reaction against something like shutting down a bridge or blocking traffic, it's really just getting at this mentality of convenience, right? It's getting at a mentality of comfort. And this is something that I just viscerally just really hate, to be honest with you, is just this idea that the comfort and the convenience of certain individuals is of greater import than the security and the safety of other people. And right now we're living in a capitalist society where that is just a fact of life. And that, for me personally, is what I was pushing up against. So yes, we are disrupting the ability of vehicles to get from point A to point B. That isn't a travesty of justice. What is a travesty of justice is a rapist getting on the Supreme Court. And so whenever we do this, whenever we engage in this action, we are pushing up against that sensibility, which is something that we must challenge in order to dismantle capitalism. But it's also something where we're it was kind of funny to me to watch people get on Facebook like a full week after this protest happened and still be, kind of saying, well, I just don't think that you should shut down a bridge. I just don't think you should do that. Because by continuing to engage in this...
blockade.
Yeah, I know. Bless their hearts. But to me, the fact that they are still getting their voice out there, still talking about this protest, still talking about this action, to me, that tells me that it worked, right? Just in the sense that people are still talking about this. And if we had not been arrested, if we had not been that disruptive, they would not be talking about this. They probably would not have even known that it happened. And so I think it's sort of like we're going out there and we're getting a lot of attention, national attention, in fact, around this issue. And I think that whenever people look at their TV or they are scrolling through Facebook and they see this, they're kind of confronted with this question of these 14 individuals were willing to get arrested for this. They were willing to go to jail for this. What am I doing? Right? So.
And to speak a little bit more to the supported aspect of it, just like, yeah, it's like, this is kind of why I joined DSA. Like, being part of this growing socialist movement in the U.S. And, yeah, it's now the largest socialist organization, 50,000 members. And the Austin is, at 1,000 members? Or?
I think it's 1,100.
Oh, 1,100 members. It's just, it feels... I felt like for a long time before that I was searching for something to a group of people who we could had a shared understanding of the way the world works. And it's like this moment was definitely showed or reminded me why I joined. We, as soon as the news got out that we got arrested, people were posting in our channels like, hey, these people are at the jail. We had people that were able to like contact our emergency contacts and what else? And then people that were signing on to like show up when we got out and like keep up with the news and keep in contact with those emergency contacts. People brought us pizza and soda and candy and it was, we really felt the love. So it's pretty cool. I mean, we're witnessing a moment where people are starting to come up. People are starting to realize that they have to devote a certain part of their lives to this, like that they can't kind of like sink back into like a comfortable routine because like this is it. Like, yeah.
because all of this horror happening in the way that it's happening relies on them doing that, right? It relies and depends on their complicity and their doing nothing and maintaining a comfortable, convenient lifestyle.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Obviously the people who chose to engage in this, the protesters that day, were taking an active step to, be outside of the comfort zone. But that, as I feel, first of all, the material conditions deteriorate, but then as, we see, as we see forces that, on the Republican side that just do not give a damn about public opinion, just straight up sort of absolute elitism in the sense of like they are out for themselves. They are the fox watching the hen house. And then we have on the other side I do want to mention once again that the congressional Democrats were absolutely despicable in so many ways. On the one hand, they all gave the kind of speeches, but they had multiple opportunities where they could have shut down if they were really invested in the safety of women. They had multiple opportunities. The Democrats, the congressional level, the kind of Democratic Party elites, the Chuck Schumers and whatnot, could have very easily, shut down the actual confirmation hearings several times over. They could have not shut down the hearings, but they essentially, like, first of all, they could have denied quorum to the Judiciary Committee, which would have essentially made sure that nothing could have gone forward. They also could have, delayed the vote past a certain number of days, where the hearings, where essentially the confirmation would have fallen through the way that the Republicans did just a few years back during the Obama administration. The Republicans had the minority in Congress, and yet were able to prevent an Obama Supreme Court justice from being confirmed to the Supreme Court. So the Democrats, though, refuse to engage in any of these politics because in many ways they sort of act as a sort of symbiotic in the symbiotic relationship where, like, essentially because they're especially again Democrats at the congressional level, their policies have drifted so far to the right, they are so indistinguishable, especially on foreign policy, but often on domestic policy as well, from the Republicans, that the only thing they can do is to allow the Republicans to essentially wreck this and that, and then for them to be able to say, here is what happens when you don't vote for us, just shaming the rather than galvanizing a progressive base, simply shaming people into voting more. And it just, I don't know, it's disgusting, and I think people are seeing it more and more for what it is.
I joke. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, wow, Brian. It's as if like we don't have a left and right, and we only have a top and a bottom in our society.
I was joking with you the night that me and Maddie got out of jail that I don't think it was then. I think it was actually the other day. But at any rate, we were talking about the Democrats, and the motto of the Democrats is, how could you do this to us? And that's just what keeps on happening, right? I mean, like the Republicans have shown repeatedly that they're willing to play hardball, that they're willing to play dirty, that they're willing to do literally illegal things in order to pass the policies that they want and maintain their grip on power. And all of the completely despicable theatrics that happened during, Dr. Ford's hearing and the Kavanaugh hearing aside, I think that it's just looking at the ways that they engage in voter disenfranchisement. I think that we can just look at that and recognize that the tactics being employed by Democrats are not working, right? Because the Democrats, whenever we're talking about that, just on that subject, the majority of individual people in America have been left-leaning or, Democratic-leaning for decades now, right? In terms of sheer numbers, the Democrats could have been winning for decades now, but they're not. And they're not because Republicans are sabotaging every attempt to organize that base that the Democrats make. And the Democrats aren't fighting fire with fire, right? Like they're just sort of, I don't even know how to describe it. I don't know how to describe the kind of half-hearted reaction that they're giving.
Both of the parties are the parties of the wealthy.
Yeah, they are. They are. It's
just
not really about organizing a base.
Yeah, we can't ignore any longer that wealth watches out for wealth. I mean, we also have this like great illusion that the new capitalists of Silicon Valley are somehow like different, and then we're seeing that what was the one the other day that came out that they gave like the maximum donation to Steve King.
Oh yeah, yeah, like they're
like
shocking.
It's just like wealth protects wealth, and like all of our Democratic representatives are are wealthy. The median income in the Senate is what, like $3 million?
Even Beto, even Beto O'Rourke, who is the darling of Texas right now. I mean, he's like a millionaire or a billionaire.
Yeah, I believe with Beto, he's connected through his wife to essentially El Paso-based real estate developers.
Yes,
he's sitting on a very large fortune.
Yeah, and like, even if you want to talk about the ramifications of the Supreme Court, like, I was watching this documentary on Roe v. Wade, and it's like, the idea that abortion was ever illegal for rich women, that's a fiction. Like,
that's true, dude. They can just hop a flight to Canada.
What person in our government even cares if Roe v. Wade is overturned? They're going to get abortions. Their daughters are going to get abortions. Their mistresses are going to get abortions. It is only the working class that will be harmed. And then we can go all into this system of like a maintaining capitalism when women are confined and to their roles.
I just have been doing a lot of like reflecting on just sort of like the sociocultural kind of implications, the things that got us here, right? And I was having this conversation at this potluck that Maddie and I were at the other night, and one of my female friends made this observation about how the Christian church has made gossip a sin, right? It's a sin to gossip, and that's it's at least associated with women, right? Like, it's kind of a uniquely feminine sin, at least the way that we tend to think of it. And I just immediately kind of had this reaction to that, because gossip is how I found out which men were rapists before I got involved with them, right? And so there's just all these myriad ways in which the power of women is just sort of like sabotaged or made into something bad, or made into something, just snaky and, untrustworthy. And I think that we have to, in order to really confront these power structures, a huge part of that fight, right, is confronting the sociocultural stuff, like confronting misogyny, right? Confronting misogyny in our culture, in our communities, in our interpersonal relationships, and the ways that plays out. I don't know. I mean, it's easy to get really overwhelmed with all the different things that we have to confront right now. But I mean, to me, that's kind of key. Like, it starts at home. It starts, in the way that you interact with other people.
Yeah, and I think, if we want to understand where it is that misogyny and, women's oppression comes from, we can actually look at the very development of class structure, that essentially the kind of gender roles, gender norms, and especially gender, the cis heteronormativity and the oppression of women comes so largely from the necessity to kind of reproduce that class structure in order to at the point at which there when class develops out of the first time that there's essentially a surplus of goods or services. It's like we're no longer in survival. We now are able to hoard certain things. That was the point at which we first started seeing that patriarchy develop in kind of early human society, and so understanding that there's that economic basis that in order to another thing, I know this is kind of beyond the scope of this episode, but just thinking in terms of what other things are necessary for women's liberation, and we've I've been talking in a lot of my circles about the need to guarantee housing, because there are so many women who are stuck in abusive relationships because they feel that they won't be able to pay rent, et cetera, et cetera. So that guarantee of housing, of basic like
healthcare.
Housing, healthcare, all of these things, these material needs. Because it's not like you can tackle one without tackling the other.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Do you mind if I really wanted to say that I'm glad that you're broadening the scope of this, because I actually felt with that protest, I didn't actually hold any kind of like Kavanaugh sign And I even felt sometimes that uncomfortable with the focus on the Kavanaugh in our chanting because, yeah, I was not on that bridge because I'm so mad at this one person. It is the entire system. And I do think that sometimes, I remember this during the Occupy protests, that people get kind of like frustrated when protest movement or actions or movements are broad, but I want to take that on, because we have to connect these dots. Yeah, I mean we're going to lose if we focus myopically on individual, like, oh, it should have been Merrick Garland, like.
Even though I think Merrick Garland had as a judge had something like a 93% alignment rating with Kavanaugh. Like essentially they voted the same in like 93% of cases. So obviously it's that 7% where we have to, and
that's what we're fighting for.
And it really gets to this structure, like, the fact that so many people are not challenging or are not looking critically at the fact that we have these 9 unelected people who
what is the percentage of Yale graduates on it too?
Yeah, it goes back like the very original Supreme Court that were essentially like slave owners. It was an absolute, absolute like dictatorship of the elite right from the very beginning. And it doesn't, like, to me, that there's this kind of cult around, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The some people even call her the notorious RBG, which I think is just so bad, so problematic in so many ways. I mean, it wouldn't matter if there were 9 Ruth Bader Ginsburgs on the Supreme Court, because it's essentially it's an undemocratic institution. It should not exist in the form it does, but it people need to understand it was set up to be anti-democratic. It was set up to be the last line of defense for the wealthy, for the most racist, misogynist people on earth. When democracy was accidentally breaking through at any point, the Supreme Court has been there to shut it down. With the exception, the only points at which the Supreme Court has ever been quote unquote progressive was at points where there was a very, very strong workers or Black Power movement or a women's power movement that was operating independently of the two parties. The truth is, the court that ruled on, for instance, Brown versus Board of Education, that was a very, very hyper reactionary court. They didn't actually have like these progressive leanings. They made the desegregation concession because they were put under pressure. Same with Roe versus Wade, because there were going to be revolts otherwise.
And that decision too. I mean, if you want to get into that, like the decision that gave us Roe v. Wade is not something to necessarily be celebrated, right? Like the focus on this like privacy thing. It's not an enshrinement of women's rights in the Constitution. It's the weakest thing we have,
Yeah, it's an absolutely narrow reading of that, and I think that's the other sort of thing that I feel that people need to look at. I know we've been kind of all over the map with this, and I think that's good sometimes. That as these assaults on whatever democracy has managed to accidentally infiltrate the U.S. political system, as these sort of assaults on democracy happen, we should be not just resisting, but in fact pushing back. So when they try and come for abortion rights or union rights, that's not the point at which we try and then kind of fall back on like Obamacare. That's not the point where we try and fall back on like sort of these half measures, these stopgaps. But that's the point at which I've seen a lot of calls for essentially like free readily available abortion on demand, like where it's now it's like we not only need to protect the rights to have abortions, but in fact push those rights even further. Yes. Make that demand more.
Repeal the Hatch Act.
What's that?
Yeah.
Repeal the Hatch Act.
Yeah. So much really there. We've been going for quite a while. I think that there have been a lot of thoughts. I'd like to bring it back around to kind of your thoughts from the protest, kind of walking away from that. How do you feel about kind of the state of the state of protests here in Austin or nationally, and what is it that you feel we need to be doing?
I think that I hope, right, that the Republicans are making a big mistake with this, because I think that there was a time in American history when the elites kind of realized that they had to vent some of the pressure. And I think that they're completely forgetting about that right now. And what they're doing is they're radicalizing people, right? Like they're mobilizing people, you know. I'm sure it's not on purpose, but there are people, and it is my hope that people will see, you know, protests like the one that we engaged in, and will be moved to action by that. You know, because if you disagree with us shutting down a bridge for 3 hours, but you're not doing anything, I don't care, right? Like I'm completely unaffected by your critique and your criticism, because you're not doing
voting
anything.
For Beto isn't enough?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that will win the revolution, but that remains to be seen. TBD by voters on November 6th. But yeah, I mean, I feel empowered by it. I used to be very sort of hesitant toward more radical action like this, just because of the implications, because I felt that I wouldn't be able to hold on to the hard-won stability that I've gotten in my life. But the reality is stability is slowly disappearing for all of us, whether that comes in the form of climate change or fascism or both, right? Because they're both, you know, kind of hand in hand. Mm-hmm. I think we must act. We must do what we can, and I recognize that is liable to be something different for everybody. But if you're a listener and you didn't like our protests, that's fine. But I hope that you will take action. I hope that you will take action you do agree with, in order to, you know, push up against the rise of fascism in America and all of the other threats that we're up against right now.
I think, what Marina said is exactly what I've been thinking. We're here all downwardly mobile, it would seem. And throughout this conversation, I keep thinking back to the IPCC report from last week. We are quick. I mean, it is now the time to start talking about like existential threats to our society, and people don't like to talk about that because it sounds a little too like, I don't know, tinfoil hat or apocalyptic. But yeah, so now's the time, and I would just like to encourage thinking about how we can't do this on our own. Capitalism thrives by capitalism and fascism and right-wing authoritarian governments thrive by making us feel alone. And we have a big problem with loneliness in our society. I would encourage, if you do feel like you want to get involved somehow or like do something directly related to this appointment, try to get involved in some organization. I've got to plug DSA. Am I allowed to say that our next general body meeting is this Thursday?
Absolutely, yeah.
So and we're big kind of like, we have multiple kind of arms, like we like to say, what keeps you up at night, because you can find that in DSA and get plugged in.
Meaning like the solution, like right. People working to address the thing keeping you up at night.
Thank you, Marina. But if not DSA, I mean, think about how you can build these structures within your life and your community, how you can like support one another, how you can get, because we can't do it alone, and thinking about what action you can take without thinking first what kind of like group, what kind of people mobilizing, like what that looks like. That's the first step there, the kind of like where or the people. And I was wondering if we would have time to maybe discuss a little bit of the jail portion.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think we should absolutely because especially so many people may either have a fear of that. genuine, like, what happens to me, and have never experienced that, or otherwise just might not sort of be aware of those conditions. So yeah, if you can talk about your kind of experience with that, would be great.
Yeah. So everything here is, I mean, we stand on the shoulders of giants applicable here? I don't know. We stand on the shoulders of very terrible or very wonderful people that have gone through very terrible things. Sorry, I'll explain. Getting arrested is very surreal when you are aware of, sorry, I don't want to talk up my awareness too much, but I mean, like, I've read whatever the new Jim Crow disclaimer. I have a sister in prison, and then also just having witnessed the kind of like brutal treatment of Black Lives Matter protesters. So, like, I was aware of a bunch of white women getting arrested in Austin, with the police department was even telling us that, like, we're on your side. We support you. Like, we support your right to free speech. We support your right to what did they say? Do you remember? Like, we support your First Amendment rights to be out here. Yeah. So, like, yeah, jail and our jail and our criminal justice system is this, like, brutal nightmare in the U.S., but, like, going into this one in particular, from the experiences that we have and with the support we had, it did feel a little bit like, I don't know, like this, I'm going to say slumber party version of it, which is a little bit self-deprecating, I guess, because But
it wasn't like, sort of supermax prison. It was...
Yes. And so it was weird, because it was like, I don't want our experiences to be too valorized without kind of, like, putting it in the context. I mean, yeah, when I was in my jail cell, I was thinking about Sandra Bland. Like, how if you were caught up in this system without having the kind of, like, support we did, and, like, without and, like, being arrested in a liberal city where they are concerned about their optics, how that would it's terrible. And so that's just where my mind went a lot. But I mean, just in general, the experience, it was really kind of, like, surreal the way they, like, you were just setting up the scene earlier as a very, like, overreaction, which is true. The show of force, like, they definitely were putting on this show. I mean, I counted at one point 50 cops standing behind me, like, and there were definitely more in the area. It was an incredible amount of force showing up for 14 people on a bridge, and then some more people on the sidelines, but I mean, a very nonviolent display. But it was very interesting the way, like, we were being handled very gently. I think they were very aware of the media presence, even though they did actually set up kind of like a blockade, I think, in an effort to prevent the cameras from actually getting the moment of the arrest. They did not succeed. But we were very much like, oh, excuse me, ma'am, like, if you wouldn't mind, like, step into this. Like, they were very polite to us, which, yeah, I mean, I for one wasn't buying. I mean, I wasn't, like, saying thank you on purpose, because it's like, thank you for not brutalizing me. Like,
I think the police can very much turn this. They try to very much turn this into a PR campaign, right, about how great they are. I remember seeing them hand a couple water bottles out to people on the bridge, which is obviously a necessity for people to be drinking. Because right, it was a hot day on a hot bridge. But very much the fact that they know they have people filming, and then the fact fact that there were legal observers present from the National Lawyers Guild who were very much, could testify to the treatment. I would also say the fact that it was predominantly white, definitely played into how the police handled it. But I think more than anything, it was the optics, really.
Yeah, so I was trying to stay aware of that. But then I would say that when we got to the jail, I mean, it was a lot more disorienting when we were actually in the jail. I mean, like, the kind of, like, way some people were friendly in the jail, but a lot of people were really, like, sit down. Like, it was very much, like, rules and structure, but weirdly arbitrarily enforced structure, which feels intentional because of the disorienting factor that could have. And then, before we get off the air, I just want to make sure we say this. When we were sitting in the booking area, a cop joked to his buddies that the after party was the Kavanaugh confirmation party would be at Yellow Rose that evening, and he definitely did it in earshot of us. Like, that was definitely an intentional kind of, like, rubbing our noses in it. Like, haha, look at you guys now. Like, everyone's sitting around in these, like, tight zip ties that are, like, eating into my wrist, even though they did offer to. But, and then eventually we actually got put into cells on our own. And that was very, very strange. I always imagined that jail people got put into kind of like a group holding area. But at the end we had our own cells, and we couldn't sleep because the lights were on, and people had to inspect like every what felt like 10 minutes, but you don't know the time, which is also a form of like disorientation. It was an intense experience. I'll remember it for a long time, and just sitting there, and when you're alone with your thoughts, just thinking about kind of like what you did and where you are and the context, like I was saying, thinking about Sandra Bland and all of the people that get arrested without that kind of support, and just the system is bad, and with it you can only even glimpse so much of the rottenness of it if you're at like the privilege that I have, and just knowing that it just gets worse and worse the more you uncover.
Yeah.
Marina, I would love to hear your.
I second everything Maddie said. I mean, I think that it was intentionally disorienting, and I think to be honest, I wasn't very surprised by anything that happened. It was just like Maddie said, we were treated very gently, I think, because we were predominantly a group of white women with only a few people of color in the mix. And then I think, getting in and out kind of with the efficiency that we did, all things considered, I think that was all just sort of, par for the course, given the nature of what had transpired and what we had actually done. I guess my kind of observations are more just sort of along the lines of there's a very real way in which prison is, or not prison, sorry, but, jail or incarceration, anything in that bucket, right, is dehumanizing. And, getting to experience that firsthand, even if it was only for the duration of like 8 hours, was, it just cemented for me that incarceration is the stupidest way to solve social problems. I mean, if people are breaking laws, then maybe the laws are unjust, or maybe the society is unjust, right? Maybe people's needs aren't being met. And I just think that this approach that locks people in a room where they're unable to do anything productive, where they're unable to educate themselves, where they're unable to engage in creative work, where their social relationships are inhibited and hindered. It's really, really nailed down for me at this point. I mean, nobody very, very few of the officers look you in the eye whenever they're talking to you.
Yeah.
And a lot of the questions that they ask, you know, there's no explanation as to why you're being asked certain questions. So you're being asked where you work. You're being asked whether or not you become angry or violent when you drink. You're being asked just these bamboozling questions. And the very last question that I got asked whenever we were being released, you know, they were just sort of filling out this paperwork and giving me my money back. And a man asked me, "You gonna leave?" Or no, what did he say? He said,
"Are you going?
He said, "You gonna kill yourself when you get out of here?" And he didn't even look me in the eye. You know, he didn't make eye contact. He just sort of, you know, asked that question very flatly. And, you know, I guess just things like that, where if that question is designed to prevent people from harming themselves after they leave the jail, I can't imagine that you would be able to pick up on somebody who is lying if you weren't even looking them in the face.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a threat. That sounds less of a question and more of a suggestion. Like, really.
And if you say yes, I am going to harm myself, then I assume that just means that they keep you in the jail longer.
Oh my gosh.
Which, of course, I mean, if I were going to harm myself, I certainly wouldn't. I would consider that, and I would lie. I just can't. The whole structure just seemed designed to, you know, sort of protect the officers from any kind of liability and not really help, right? Not help at all. Not help anybody.
Yeah, no, because it's not a. I'd say, you know, I don't think there's anything we don't know, but yeah. it's not a. It's not a well-intentioned system that's flawed and actually went wrong at some point. It's a system that's very much designed with the most malicious of intentions. It's the prison industrial complex. It exists. Obviously, jail is a different experience than prison, but it's it's all part of the same system. And I feel like people need to see that in these so-called progressive cities or self-described progressive cities, which so many people are now seeing that Austin isn't even a progressive city on the surface of it. But in these kind of self-described progressive cities such as Austin, the police still serve the same function. They still have the same blue wall of silence when it comes to, the allegations made against this or that officer. When it comes to a police brutality or police killing case, there's still that same blue wall of silence. And it's, it's the same people, really is. And we can't, I think a lot of people have a lot of people I saw still have a lot more faith in the police system than they should. But I think we're getting to that point. I think more people are seeing it for what it is, that didn't necessarily have those kind of interactions with the system as they see this system in action. Like at least 50 cops there, with pretty much every police vehicle in the city. And I know Austin Police Department, I heard the other day, also has tanks, though they never kind of bring them out, thanks to all the kind of military surplus post-Iraq War. So understanding that when you dare to disrupt, and this is kind of how we bring it full circle, when you dare to disrupt that's the commerce, when you dare to cross the line between just kind of being seen off to the side and forcing people to actually see you and actually have to like deal with this thing, when you start to disrupt the kind of gears that keep this oppressive system running smoothly, that's where you start to see like the absolute worst of what these systems actually are, the police system and the jail system, the carceral state as it is.
Yeah.
Any sort of last thoughts? I know we've been through a lot. Any sort of last thoughts as we kind of wrap up?
Do you want to take this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just I'm grateful for the perspective that I got from this experience. Seeing just the guttural anger of people. Some individuals, certainly not everyone, but some people who just screamed and got in our faces and just cussed us, and were just so angry for what was fundamentally an inconvenience, a sort of brief interruption in their day, and I just wish I could see a little bit of that anger for these things that matter, for these things that are not temporary, not quickly removed by a coordinated state effort, not easily done away with. I think that the anger of the women on that bridge was righteous, and it was powerful because it shut things down. And I think that that's the power that we have to kind of recognize that we have first off, and then utilize, because I think of an action like shutting down a bridge, like, leading a protest through a street and shutting down traffic. These are sort of, it's almost like a strike against the state, right? It's a strike against the continuation of the society running smoothly, regardless of the harm that society is outputting on the backs of working people, on the backs of women, on the backs of immigrants. It's something where I think whenever we decide that enough is enough truly, and we say this, we will no longer abide this, it actually is kind of profoundly simple, because capitalism only works with us. And whenever we say no more, it stops. And it's, of course, going to take a lot more time than just me saying that. But I guess to me, this feels like a beginning,
Yeah.
Oh, that was awesome, Marina. Yeah, I guess you said it all, but just this feeling that things have the potential to get a lot worse. I had the opportunity to be interviewed on TV. Unfortunately, none of my anti-capitalist remarks made it on the air. But yes, I did. I mean, I truly believe that no rights are safe under capitalism because all protections are threatening the bottom line, and capitalism has to grow to survive or to function. Yeah. And I fear for what's going to happen. I mean, we see this all out campaign against any kind of worker protection in this country. We saw the Janus decision, and I can only imagine that there's more in the pipeline. There's more in these think tanks, these unholy think tanks that just, oh my gosh, that are so well funded. Like even here in Austin, the Texas Public Policy Foundation, they own their own building downtown. It's just, they're just people that just feel strongly about these beliefs. So it's just, yeah, things are going to get worse unless we realize that, unfortunately, it's going to take some sacrifice. Like, we have to confront what kind of lives we're living, and that's uncomfortable. And I understand that a lot of people actually do not have the capacity for this. Maybe their parents or they're working more than one job. But if you do, you got to think about what you can do, and who you can get involved with. And yeah, before, I would be remiss if I didn't thank the people that our fellow angry people out on the bridge. It was a really beautiful mixture of leftists and feminist activists, and we all learned a lot from each other going through that experience together. And
absolutely.
And yeah, we're all we all held each other's backs, and like that kind of like fearlessness doesn't come from just your one person. It's reinforced by seeing the people around you. Yeah,
it was solidarity. It was absolutely solidarity.
It's a wonderful feeling, a powerful feeling. And it's powerful, and that's why. And the people in power know that, and that's why they don't want that.
Yeah, the scariest thing I feel like is that kind of mass solidarity and that sense of camaraderie that comes when you join people in the struggle. That's something that's very, very frightening to those in high places right now. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. We're going to have the entire interview available online on Spreaker. You can check out our Spreaker page at People's Republic, and we will have the extended, just over an hour-long interview. We have been talking with Maddie Detelich and Marina Roberts, who are the co-chairs of the Austin Democratic Socialists of America Housing Committee, the Housing Committee of the Austin DSA, and they were also both protesters in the anti-Kavanaugh protest that happened recently here in Austin that shut down the Lamar Bridge for just over 3 hours. So thank you both very much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Brian, for having us, and thanks for doing what you do.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was a blast.